Hello everyone and welcome to this video where we are taking what was once our trial test and seeing how it applies in the real world, and by real world I mean Stormworks world. So in the last video we had a series of trials where we ended up pressurizing the tanks and filling them with water, and by tanks I mean ballast tanks. So what I did is I took off the backs of these test modules, so now instead of being sort of inside a tank, it is inside the big blue ocean. So what it is just testing is to make sure that our theories or our hypothesis is valid, in a sense that maybe, just maybe, it was functioning differently because it was inside a sealed compartment, and even though the compartment was open to the top for pressure, it wasn't actually open in a sense that it still was considered a compartment in the world of Stormworks. So this trial is pretty much verifying this test and making sure that it works just as we had intended. So in this case, I can just turn on the water pump and you can see that it is starting to rise. In this next case, what we're going to do is we're going to allow the valve to let in some water. Then we're going to pump out the air and we're going to pump the water in. So in this case we're not pumping anything in except for the water, whereas here we're doing sort of the three things simultaneously. They're pumping in while pumping the air out, while also allowing our chamber to be open with this valve. In this one we're going to bypass the valve and just go pump the water in, pump the air out. So as you can see, this second test already surpassed the first one. Now this one is just doing the it's not doing the valve, it's just doing the pumping in and pumping the air out. And in this one we're just going to be sure that it works the same way. We're going to pump the air in, we're going to open up the valve so it actually expels the liquid. Which is interesting because the next video I make is going to be a moon pool. I stopped the video to think about that. It is going to be a moon pool. So you can see here the fastest system is clearly this one, where we have all three of these things going at once. This one's already full. This one, where we just had our simple water pump in, it was going a little slower. This one here is actually going not as fast, but it is going. So we can confirm that even though our original test was inside a closed compartment or closed chamber, like the boxes were closed chambers with water, it functions the exact same way in the ocean. So that actually makes me happy, because one of the things that I was wondering was if the tests are valid. Now here we have it. These first two are full. This one is almost full. So all three of these systems do work. It just comes down to how well they do work. One final test I want to do in the real world is the following. I've added a little vent on the side with a gas relief valve, and if you turn this on, it allows air to enter. So you pretty much can balance out your reservoir or your ballast tank to become atmospheric pressure. I'm curious how that works in relation to the pumping. So if we pump water in while keeping the tank with this valve open, so meaning that it will eventually balance out to atmospheric pressure, how that works versus if we turn on all the things, because now we're pumping air out while also keeping this open. So it's kind of counterintuitive. See, it's actually increasing, so we have to close that valve. And then we end up in the same situation we were earlier, whereas this one is open to the top, or open to the atmosphere. So really, there's no need to do the rest, but it's just a comparison of these two. So it still does work if you have your tank open to atmospheric conditions. I guess I can restart by just removing these pumps here to make these two situations identical. The first two, so the first two do not have any pumps on the top. They're just purely the pump on the bottom. So in this one, I'm actually gonna start pumping water in, and on this one I'm going to open the valve and start pumping water in. I'm just curious, between these two, what goes faster? And then of course here we know our little test or examination of the situation, if we pump in while pumping air out, or if we open up the valve underneath, pump in, pump out. This should still be the fastest way by far. The very left one should be the fastest, but between these two, so where we have the valve open and where we have the valve closed, meaning it's a fully sealed chamber, even though this keeps increasing a little bit, which is a little concerning, it means that our little valve on the bottom, or liquid valve on the bottom, is allowing some gas in. You can see this number is increasing ever so slightly, but it is increasing. Now whether the game considers gas mixed in with the liquid, I'm not quite sure, but you could see the difference in these is almost negligible, especially because we started this one a little sooner. I guess this one is actually going faster, which is interesting. It has higher pressure. This one has a bit lower pressure, but this one is nearly complete, or rather almost 2/3 of the way. This one is still less than half, and then these two are way behind. Oh, interesting. This one seems to have shot up. Okay, so definitely don't do this. Where's my button? Nope. Don't do this. So if anything, do this, which is a fully sealed chamber, no anything. Don't have a relief valve on it. It's only going to slow it down. And then between these, obviously, we definitely know that having 3 points of intake, or rather pumping the oxygen or air out while pumping water in, while having a valve, is the fastest. You can see between these two, and you can see between these two. Now, interesting enough, this one is pretty much full, or this one is full. This one's almost full. Now, we did start it a little earlier, or sooner, before that one, but still, I'm kind of impressed. So these two scenarios are the best, and by two scenarios, I'm gonna reiterate, this one here is purely a pump with no relief valve whatsoever, so your tank becomes pressurized. And then over here we have the full shebang. We have pumping liquid in, pumping air out, and using a valve to open up to the water level and just letting water in through that. So we're pretty much using it as a plunger situation, or I guess like a suctioning situation over there. Now, one last test that I want to do, because we're already here. We mentioned it in the previous video, and it is whether or not, because obviously this one was the fastest because it had 2 points of water coming in. It had a pump, plus it had the pressure suction system. So what I did is, on this one here, I actually went ahead and installed a second pump. You could see, actually right here. So this one has 2 pumps controlled by the button here, whereas this one still has the one. So I'm curious now if 2 pumps is going to be better than pumping this out. So in both cases, we're going to relieve the air. So in both cases, let's pump this out. In this left one, we're going to enable the valve and the pump. So let's go for it. And then here, we're going to turn this on. There's no valve to enable, so now we're just having 2 pumps on. Whereas here we have 1 pump on and we have 1 valve that is open. If we go back there, we could actually see both our pumps are on. They're both pumping in. Whereas here, our valve is open and this pump is pumping in. So let's see, between these ones here, what is faster? Presumably the 2 pumps will be faster, but in that case, in this case we actually created a suction with pumping the air out, whereas here we're just using the pumps. So actually the 2 pumps are faster. You could see that visually it has surpassed that level. Now I'm curious, as a last test, is if this case has the pumps working and this case has the valve open and this, but both are pumping oxygen out. That's what I wanted to say. Both pumps are pumping air out. Is it better to create a suction system? So more or less the same, actually. So is it better to create a suction system like this, where we pull the water out, or pull the air out and create a suctioning effect, and then run a pump in parallel with our suctioning system? Or in this case, I'm not going to open up the valve. So here I'm just going to press the on button. So we're going to start pumping, and here we're going to, oops, actually I jumped the gun. Let's pump some of that water out. Okay, in this case we are going to open up the valve. We're going to start pumping air out. Okay, so let's prepare it. Air is coming out. Then we are going to press these two things. So boom, boom, and here we're just going to press pump water in. So are two pumps in parallel better than this whole shebang system, which included a pump in for the water, a pump out for the air, and a valve? Are two pumps just better? Two pumps, nothing else. Yes, we could have removed all this to make sure that nothing's coming through. Hopefully it's not. I know this still shows some gas leaving or whatever, but this is interesting. So now it seems two pumps, just two pumps, purely two pumps, nothing else, is better than the whole system we devised, which had an intake, which had the pressuring and depressuring and whatever. So actually this to me is the best. The only question that now comes into play is when you're pumping out, because of course in this case you're pumping in, so you have two pumps pumping in. In this case you'd also need two pumps to pump out, otherwise it will be slow, because when we do this, I mean, it is a bit high pressure, so it is pumping out a little faster. If we turn all this stuff off and then we pump air in to increase the pressure and then start pumping out, and then also open the valve, they seem to be okay. The left one is actually faster because we created that high pressure situation. Now what if we pump air in? Granted, we're still pumping it out, so the pump can only go so fast, but it still seems that this one is faster for pumping out, whereas this one is still only using one single pump. So if it was two pumps, it would probably be twice as fast. And this one's kind of stalled out now, whereas this one has been completed. So both are good. I'm going to go ahead and say both of these systems are good. You could just have two pumps in parallel, simple as that. Or you can have that whole system of multiple pumps pumping in liquid, pumping in oxygen or air, and use a valve that just opens and makes the water flow in freely through it, only depending on the pressure of the system. Alright, so that was a mouthful. Thank you all for watching, for letting me test this call it real life application situation rather than being in the hangar in our closed little modules. So that was kind of fun to see what is actually in practice the best way, or at least up until now. This is with the latest Hotfix 1.9.12. If there are new hotfixes, potentially this will change, but as of now, this is what's happening. Thank you all for watching. Stay tuned for more content, more creations, and as always, happy Stormworksing, everyone.